Okay,
Right.
it's booting up.
There we go.
Hey.
So Morgan, this is the first in the season
Yes.
for History Talks.
Yes, this is our first history talk for the fall season. We had some, our last one was in May, I believe. Okay, hi everyone and welcome. I'm listening to us live while I'm monitoring us live and I got a little lost. Let me mute that. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're sorry about the little hiccup that we had with getting the tech connected. It's been a few months and apparently going on Facebook after a while takes a minute to warm up. So thank you for your patience and thank you for joining us. I am so thrilled to get started on our History Talks panels again. So welcome everybody. Before we get started, I wanted to do a land acknowledgement for the city, for the area of Santa Clarita. We acknowledge that the land the Santa Clarita libraries are built on is the traditional territory of the Fernandeño-Tataviam people. As we begin this history talk, this history is one that is important to acknowledge, and we honor their history and their ancestral grounds. We encourage you to research and discover the history of the Indigenous peoples whose lands you are joining this program from virtually. You can find out more information about the many tribelet units who are the Fernandeño-Tataviam Band of Mission Indians and their history at the website that I'm going to put in the chat right now. So with that, thank you all your authors for joining us, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to John.
Hello, Santa Clarita. Thank you very much, Morgan, for inviting us here for this inaugural history talk for the fall season, and we're honored to be here. We have a distinguished panel of very accomplished writers, and we're glad you and the audience have joined us. We're going to ask some provocative questions. Hopefully they're provocative and help people to think through history and historical fiction and how it's written and conceived. So the topic tonight is authors weave elements of history, technology, culture, environment, and the details of everyday living to create a believable world in which to set a story. In this panel, world builders discuss where research meets imagination in varied realms ranging from ancient, medieval, and Victorian times to early California, World War I and II, and turn of the century Antarctica and the Old West. Boy, that's a lot of history. So tonight we have with us Zenobia Neil. Hello, Zenobia.
Hello.
She's the author of, I should have asked you how to pronounce this, Ariadne Unraveled is a mythic. There we go. Now we're official.
Sorry, one more little technical
No
blip.
problem. No problem.
We'll put your full introduction on the site.
Do it again.
It's still going out on the live stream.
Okay.
So we're good.
So Zenobia Neil is Ariadne Unraveled. She writes, she uses myth in retelling of myth, and this story is a love story between Ariadne and Dionysius, which takes place in the Bronze Age Crete surrounding the Aegean Islands. Now, my understanding is this is set about 2000 BC. Is that correct, Zenobia?
About, yeah.
Okay.
I have more to say about the.
I'm sure you do. Just a brief blurb here. One of her blurbs said this is one of the best retellings of ancient Greek myth that I've read, and if you aren't already in love with Dionysius, you will be. Neil's sweeping prose takes readers back to ancient Greece, where Ariadne proves to be one of the most fascinating characters in mythology. An absolutely fantastic read. So that's quite a mouthful about your story. Wonderful story. I want to hear more about it as we go along here. Then we have Jeri Westerson. This is did I pronounce it right?
Yeah, I'm just waving. I'm just
There you
following.
go, Jeri. Okay. Tonight we're going to be she's written a lot of books, mystery series, fantasy series. And tonight we're talking about the third book in her Enchanted Chronicles, The Library of the Damned, a gaslight slash steampunk series, which is very interesting combination. The premise is the magician Leopold Casimir, the great enchanter, and his cadre of unusual friends make a deadly journey to the Library of the Damned, a structure fluctuating between the worlds, filled with the archives of the century, to find a way to rescue Leopold's father, who is trapped in the darkest depths of Gehenna. Now, Gehenna is a word for hell. Am I correct, Jeri?
The Jewish version,
Okay.
if you want to say.
Yeah. So one of her reviews of our other books said that she uses history, mythology, mystery, mythology and mystery, mixed in a rollicking adventure that offers a fresh perspective on famous legends. So here we have quite a mix in a urban fantasy. Gaslight. And gaslight is different from steampunk, isn't it, Jeri? Or are they same?
Gas lamp.
Gas lamp.
Unless I wrote that.
And we'll talk about that. Right. Then we have Linda McLaughlin, best-selling author of historical and Regency romance. Her latest novel is Lillian the Gambler, a Western historical set in Grass Valley, California. A mail-order bride sets out for a new life only to be tempted by a charming gambler. Can he convince her to pass up a sober businessman for a footloose card shark? So that's set, what, in the 1800s?
Late 1860s, right after shortly after the Civil War.
Shortly after the Civil War in Central California there in Grass Valley. Beautiful area. Okay. And then myself, I write historical novels. My latest is The Road to Delano, set in 1968 during the Delano grape strike led by Cesar Chavez. And Delano obviously is in Central California. This is a coming of age story centered on the question, can Chavez's strategy of nonviolence work for two high school kids faced with racism and injustice? Okay. So one of the blurbs from Indie Reader said this is an engaging novel, demonstrates the power of historical fiction to reevaluate the meaning of the past events by placing them in imagined contexts that help clarify the importance to the present. So one thing that sticks out to me about this panel is that all of our books are quite different, but have a common element in that they are all anchored in a distinct historical periods. And I guess that's what makes them historical fiction. We all use historical or legendary characters as either central to the story or appear in the story. So what we have in each of our stories is a nexus of history and imagination. So by applying our imagination to historical events and creating compelling characters, because that's what it all centers on, isn't it? Compelling characters. I believe this is what brings history alive for readers and why historical fiction is so woven into the consciousness of so many of our devoted readers. So in this remarkable panel today, we're going to be discussing imagination and history and how they write it. So I would like to start off with a question for all of you, a general question, Zenobia. And that is, what's the importance of historical fiction? Why are we writing this? Anybody want to pipe in on that?
Well, as George Santayana once said, those who do not understand history are forced to, doomed to repeat it, or words to that effect. And I think it's really important to know where we've come from, or especially in order to avoid some of the mistakes of the past or going back to a situation that was really not good.
So do you think it's important that historical fiction does more than just entertain, or is it just entertainment? Jeri, what do you think about that?
It is good entertainment because there's so
It has to
many.
be, right?
I mean, history is it's vast, as you can see from our different panelists of the eras that they write, and it's a way for us, I think, to be in touch with who we are now, why we are now, and I'd like to see more historical novels set in non-European areas, regions, and really get a connection, because the things we experience today happened because of actions in the past through the global movement of peoples and armies sometimes. So it's good, and it's fun and interesting to find out where and why these things happen. And when you can couch it in a wonderful piece of fiction, then I think people can connect more easily to that, rather than, because they all remember how they sat in history class and you had to memorize dates and battles and this and that. So this is
History is so much more than dates and
put
places.
themselves in it. Yeah.
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 I feel like it's a way of experiencing the past I mean, as close as we can get to time travel is reading a historical fiction novel. And so it's a way of experiencing another person's experience and story. Even though I can't say for sure this is what somebody felt like, we can imagine it. So I feel like a lot of people have a problem thinking like there's only one way that their life experience is what everybody experienced. But when you read a lot, you realize how many different life experiences there are, and it makes you a lot more empathetic. And you also learn a lot about how similar people are throughout time.
How do you, when you're studying myth and those stories, there's lots of different versions of these myths.
Yeah.
Do you take a lot of liberty with them, or do you try to stick to the most popular version?
Well, I've written 2 mythic retellings, and
Okay.
the first one was the story of Cupid and Psyche, which was very straightforward. But writing Ariadne Unraveled, there are so many different contradictory myths about Ariadne and Theseus and Ariadne and Dionysus. I think one of the books I read said that no woman in history was killed in as many different ways as Ariadne. So it was really complicated to weave a cohesive story that involved those different possibilities. Especially Ariadne and Dionysus is such an ancient story that there are just all these different ideas of what actually could have happened, or I mean, not actually, but the story is what could have happened. So in that case, I took a lot more liberty because there was no one definitive source.
I see.
Yeah.
There probably isn't a one definitive source for all of those Greek myths. Do you believe that historical novels should have a moral premise? You know, or if they're there, that's good. Or does anybody work with moral premises in their stories? Okay.
Not to say.
No morals whatsoever.
None whatsoever, Jeri?
No, that's a joke. I think that a lot of our own voices come into our novels. So if, you know, it's a good way to comment on contemporary things sometimes, and to put it in a historical setting. That sort of hides it a little bit, but also heightens it a little.
Okay. So Jeri, you write gaslight fantasy. Can you explain that a little bit? What do you mean by gaslight fantasy? Is it different?
It's gas lamp.
Gas lamp.
Because I'm not gaslighting anybody here.
Well,
Gaslamp fantasy. Well, first I thought I was writing a steampunk book. And steampunk is a subgenre of science fiction and fantasy that is a neo-Victorian setting that has sometimes alternate history involved. but all the technology, even the higher technology, is steam powered. Plus, there's a stylistic aspect of it too, with goggles and corsets and top hats and things like that.
Ray guns.
But what I'm sorry?
Ray guns.
And ray guns and gears and anything that's locomotion with the gears and pistons and things. But what it turns out I was writing is gas lamp fantasy, which is again this neo-Victorian period, but it involves more paranormal and supernatural aspects to it. So it's kind of a mashup of that. So I like the whole gas lamp fantasy, but I like a lot of the steampunk stuff. So it's and this is a micro subgenre of steampunk or of fantasy. It's genre dueling is all kinds of fun when you're trying to figure out what the heck it is that you wrote.
So you use, what historical characters do you use, or historical premises do you use to start? Do you start with a historical premise or historical event or historical character?
I wanted to, it all started with magicians of the late 19th century.
Okay.
And how interesting the whole milieu of magicians at that time period, because they were so good at what they did. And it was at such a time where science wasn't quite set yet as to what science was, that the audiences weren't sure if this was fiction, if these were tricks, or if they could actually do it, perform real magic. And so magicians played that up. And in fact, they lived some of these characters that they created on stage. And if you look at some of those amazing posters of magicians in this time period, you can see some fantastical images. They have little devils and little imps and ghostly apparitions, and they use these because they're in the imagery because they say that's how they're performing. They get help from all these supernatural powers. And so to me, that's opened a little door saying, well, what if my magician could be a magician, but also summon demons to help him perform real magic? And the demons that he summons are Jewish demons, because in researching it, there are good demons and bad demons, and it led into Jewish mysticism and all that. So, I can talk about that later, but it just
so this is where your Jewish mysticism, you incorporate Jewish mysticism, and historically there was a big following of Jewish mysticism. Am I correct?
Well,
there was a following.
In a way, but it for him, it was different. Now, the only real people that show up in these books is Queen Victoria.
Okay.
Because it's a little alternate history, I brought back Prince Albert. I didn't have him die. I thought that was mean that he died. So he gets to be there. Sad. And in Jewish mysticism, there are the different archangels and angels that I have in the book. So real people, if you want. But so we do get to talk to Queen Victoria in this. But it's the Jewish mysticism that brings the whole plot together.
So is in your book, Prince Albert, is he a spirit that comes back, or he just
no, he's there. He's just there alive.
Okay.
And married to the Queen, and
so how do you handle Queen Victoria? Do you have any qualms about putting words in her mouth she never spoke? And
not at all.
Okay.
And I think this is true of most characters that you write. You want to make sure, first and foremost, that the history is correct as your foundation.
Okay.
And if you're going to go fantasy, like this surely is, and everybody knows it is once they are starting to read it, that you can give them dialogue that is helpful as long as it seems correct for the time period. And, we don't know what they're saying every hour of the day. I mean,
Right.
nobody writes all that down. So I think they're fair game.
And you're not writing truly realistic historical fiction in the sense that
No. This
Yeah.
is for
This-
fun.
this is fantasy.
All fun, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So on the other side of that, you have Linda, who is writing realistic romances. Am I correct?
Right. Mhm.
And you write both romance, Western, set in the Western America, the West, where we are, and you also write Regency romances. What's the difference between them?
The two eras are really, really different. The Regencies are basically comedies of manners, a la Jane Austen and Georgette Heyer. And so we have a lot of drawing room comedy, drawing room situations, ballroom, the glittering ballrooms, the fabulous gowns. And it's a microcosm of British upper class society for the most part. Now mine's a little different. I show the working class life also, because my book Lady Eleanor's Escape is a Cinderella retelling, and some twists. In this case, she's actually the rich girl, but she's fallen into a bad situation with an abusive relative. So she escapes and she ends up living above a dress shop in London and working as a modiste, or an assistant anyway. So you kind of get an idea of how both sides lived.
I see. But in your recent
but then-
romance, which is set in the American West,
Right. Yeah, the West is different. I think you've got more, usually there's more adventure, and it's a little more primitive kind of situation in some cases. The characters may be a little more hard edged and have a past that they're escaping from, which was the case in Lily and the Gambler. Mail order bride claims to be a widow, but she isn't really.
so the historical event is in your book is the mail order brides.
Yeah. And there's no real, well, the historical event is the mining in Grass Valley.
Okay.
Because the man she's supposed to marry is a mine owner, and her uncle is a miner, and one of the Cornish miners. And one of the things I found fascinating about Grass Valley when we visited is that so many of the early settlers were from Cornwall, and the placer mines petered out really fast in that region, and didn't know how to do the mining that goes deep underground. And so they brought in all the Cornish miners and the Cornish pumps to pump the water out of the mines. And without the Cornish technology, they wouldn't have been able to get the gold out of the ground.
Huh.
So I thought that was really fascinating aspect. So my heroine Lily is Cornish, and to America to start over.
Linda, I have a question about with the West and writing about it. Do you find that you have a hard time convincing editors that you're writing about the real history of the West rather than the TV and film version that they're so familiar with?
I haven't. Of course, my first Western was really an Eastern. French and Indian War, and I had a lot of history in that one. And the only editor that would buy it was small press, because New York said, oh, nobody wants to read this period. And they were pretty much right. It was one of those books that you have to write, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
How do you know what period people are reading?
algorithms nowadays.
Algorithms. Okay. So they're looking at marketing data.
Yes, the bean counters.
The
Right.
bean counter.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. If you just look,
Often.
if you look at the bestsellers in historical romance, you're going to see a ton of Regencies there.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
And I'm sure there's trends within historical fiction as well. World War II is really,
World War II.
yeah.
No kidding.
Anne Boleyn.
Oh, yeah.
And Tudors, yeah. Mhm.
So where does history meet imagination in your book?
Who's that for?
Linda.
Oh,
Sorry.
well, in my characters and my plot, I just kind of go research the time period and then come up with my ideas.
So your characters are Cornish. Are they using a Cornish accent? And do you believe in doing that? Is that important to a story?
I have some of them that did. Lily has learned to speak properly. She is English,
Okay.
so she has that accent, but some of the secondary characters are dropping their H's all over the place. and doing more of the Cornish type of accent. I didn't get into it too much because readers don't like a lot of dialogue.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So in my story, The Road to Delano, my historical character is Cesar Chavez, who his kids are still alive and active, and a lot of people that work with him are alive and active. So I was very concerned about being very accurate. I don't think if I was writing in Zenobia's time frame, I don't think I would worry about it at all.
Nope.
Just have complete license. I did a lot of research. He never wrote anything for himself, but there were a lot of people who wrote down what he read. So I read as many primary sources as I could find, researched the local newspapers. Luckily, Delano is just a 4-hour drive from where I live. And I was able to find a lot of local newspapers archived in the small library where they actually quote him. Things that he said that you wouldn't find in a book or the big biography written about him. And I was able to interview a couple of people that knew him, but I wasn't close to any of his kids or people that worked really close in the movement. So in the half a dozen scenes he's in the book, I stayed as close to the actual as possible. And then my characters, I built it around it. The scenario, as one reviewer said, is a bit contrived. But my two main characters are two high school students. One's a Hispanic, his father's in the movement, and the other is Anglo, and his father's a grower. So it's a tension between the growers and the field workers. And so with both students' point of views, you get both point of views, and is able to get inside the head of some of the growers who the primary principals are all dead, but their kids are around. So again, I wanted to be as accurate as possible.
I think that's the basis of all historical novels is that you want to do the research to get the main foundation of the history, where your fiction can easily slip in and no scenes show.
Well, Jeri, you're writing fantasy, so what research do you need to do?
Well, it's a Victorian period, the time period. So
the way they dress, the way they talk.
I started with all of that in London and the streets and hansom cabs and what they ate and where and the railroad system. And as you research, you keep finding things that suggest new ideas and new places to take your plots. And if it's a multiple book series, then you can plunk some of these ideas into each of these books. So always start with the foundation of the real history. And if it's fantasy, you can certainly diverge from there. And in my medieval mysteries, definitely you get the foundation, research the real people that show up, and then your fictional detective can just step in and do his thing in this world that we built, which is the name of this panel.
Yeah, so we build a world.
There's always world building, and even when you're writing, it's historical for you, but I remember all the Cesar Chavez, the grape strikes and the grape picker strikes and all that. And, even in contemporary books set in contemporary settings, you have to research or you're going to get something wrong and somebody's going to just dismiss your entire book.
That was, that was a real concern I had because I'd heard that those who were close to Cesar Chavez were very protective of his reputation, but of his at what he did. But the book doesn't in any way. The book is the story lauds what he did and what he accomplished. He's really the hero of the story behind the scenes. But something that really encouraged me was the book got to one of his retired secretaries. She was his personal secretary for about 5 or 6 years. And she emailed me and said, I read the book and you got everything right.
Oh, nice.
So
That's
yeah.
great validation.
And I was very concerned, because if I wasn't careful, that email could have said something else. And
Yeah.
so anyway.
There's a special challenge when you're writing about a real person who is within living memory,
Yeah. That's why I like them long dead.
And
Everybody.
One of the things that Jeri was saying, I feel like there's a real connection between fantasy and historical fiction when you have specific locations, and there's and the world building in those times and places where it's kind of like, it could be medieval times or Bronze Age Crete. There are times, it's kind of, I feel like that's one reason Game of Thrones was really popular, because it was it's tangible, but it's intangible. And so you have an idea, you have the costumes, you have maybe the modes of transportation, but you also need to work out the food and the lighting and the money and all of these different aspects. So it's like you have an idea, but then as a writer, you flesh it out more. So the story has its own concrete world.
And the mores of the time. I mean, if people are not acting as they should in that time period, you're going to lose readers too, because that's just as valid as anything else you research.
Definitely. And as a reader, that's one thing I really love about historical fiction, is how you can see how people acted and what they thought was right or not right, and compare it to now, and how I feel like I can always learn a lot from that kind of situation.
Yes, the social mores are really important in romance because they're courtship stories.
Right.
Well,
people like that. People like to learn about this stuff.
And
I can't tell you how many times people have said that I loved reading this story and I learned something. So it makes you really buckle down and make sure the history is correct.
Yeah, I think historical fiction can be both informative and entertaining.
Oh yeah.
Emphasis on entertaining.
Well, it has to be entertaining first, or they're not even going to pick it up. And so there has to be a premise that's interesting, that engages them, that the language has to be appropriate for the. So what is your favorite source of information about your time period, Linda?
Oh, well, the internet makes everything so easy nowadays. That's really the first place, but I've got a lot of books that I can look at too.
You mean novels written during that time, or books written during that time?
Or well, some primary sources, some secondary sources, but a lot of books about just life in certain period.
I see. Okay.
A ton of stuff for the Regency period, a ton of research books that you can, from gentlemen's clubs of London to what Jane Austen ate and Charles Dickens knew, and things like that.
So it's a well-researched area.
It is a well-researched area, and and the West is pretty well-researched too. I don't know how Zenobia does it, but writing it ancient.
Zenobia, what are some of your favorite resources, or the ones that have been the most productive?
I mean, I have read a lot of books. One surprising source is a modern Minoan paganism site group that on Facebook that I used. I mean, in addition to reading the Dionysica, I'm probably saying that wrong, there are lots of different mythologies about Dionysus and Ariadne, but feeling the connection that some modern people have to the Minoans was really amazing. Another just basic source is the art that the Minoans left behind. I was able to travel to Crete, and a couple years ago, it was really amazing, but just like the kind of frescoes that they left behind have been really inspirational, because you can see a lot about their culture. It's not like the kind of source you normally think of, but having guidebooks that I got when I was in Crete were really helpful.
Interesting.
If you can travel to the place your book is set, it's just invaluable.
Yeah, it just tells you so much. And then feeling how much interest people still have in the Minoans and how excited they are about that. And how many people are still really into Greek mythology.
It's very popular.
Yeah, but actually one of my first sources was this book. It's Bacchus, a biography.
A biography. Interesting.
And this kind of inspired me about 5 years ago. It tells the story from a different point of view by Andrew Dalby. And that made me kind of start to think about his story in a different way. But I mean, I had probably read about 20 to 30 books when I was writing this book. And I also used a coloring book of my known frescoes, which was really cool. You're like, what are they doing? So yeah.
That's
A
interesting.
lot. It took a long time to finish this one just because it was.
If you want to do coloring first.
And I had to drink a lot of wine to get into Dionysus.
I mean, if you're going to Crete, you better join in, right?
Yeah.
So Jeri, did you how'd you come up with the Library of the Damned? Did you travel there spiritually? How did you
I have not been in any damned libraries. I've been in a lot of
Really?
libraries,
Okay.
I have not been to damned ones. No, actually, for that one, I actually came up with the titles first and then wrote to the titles. And I thought, I really love the title, Library of the Damned.
It's a good
I don't know
title.
what Morgan has to say about it, but no. But I've been to London, and in both.
Is it right above London? Right above in the air?
It's you have to go through portals and make yourself and get there with a lot of help from
maybe a little time travel,
magical things going
dimensions.
on.
Okay.
So that was fun coming up with that and all the things that they found at the library and all the traps that happened at the library and all that.
So the Library of the Damned is a library of books of
things
and things of consequential events or horrific events.
What they had to do was go to Gehenna. They had to go to hell. They had to go to Gehenna and rescue Leopold's father, who's been trapped there for a good long time. And so with the help of one of the demons of Gehenna and all of his other friends, an automaton and an imp and the ghost of a Scotland Yard inspector and Special Inspector Ming Li Zhao, who he met in the first books, and she's now his fiancée. So they're going on this journey. So the book is in a few different parts. We have the London part, we have the Library of the Damned part, we have the Gehenna part, and then the returning home part, and all the things that happen then.
So it's almost like a hero's journey.
Indeed, it is. Yes, this one particularly.
They leave the normal world.
The realm they know. Yes.
Yeah, the realm they know, and they go into the unknown world on a quest to find something.
And this is where all that Jewish mysticism sort of comes in. Well, it comes in throughout the whole series, but I don't know why I was looking at that when I was coming up with the series, but I delved deep into the Kabbalah and the Talmud and because whole Jewish mysticism is all part of the Hebrew scriptures or the Old Testament. And honestly, you really can't read the Old Testament and understand it fully without having some sort of understanding of the Kabbalah and the Talmud, because it's all about special numbers and colors and names and magic words. And some of those magic words might be abracadabra, which might be a corruption of an Aramaic phrase that says, I create you.
Ooh.
Now, linguists are kind of iffy on that one way or the other, but there's all of these things to help you fully understand all that's going on in the Old Testament, because Daniel is pretty crazy.
Oh,
and
yeah.
lots of weird stuff going on. And if you take it verbatim, you're missing a lot of the depth. So
Oh.
deep, so getting into that, and then researching Gehenna and the levels of it and all the things that go on in it was just fascinating, and I had to have it for my book. So it worked out as a fun adventure.
So that explains the content of your book. But as far as a structure, have you been influenced in your writing by the hero's journey?
Oh, all the time, sure.
Okay.
Because my medieval mysteries is, a downtrodden a disgraced knight who lost everything, and he's got to go through life and through different parts of his journey and get advice from wise ones and get deterred in other ways. It's all about the hero's journey, and human beings like that. They really do. And so it's consciously incorporated into
Absolutely.
the stuff that I write.
Yeah, I've used it too.
Linda, you use it too?
I have, yeah.
Okay. Zenobia, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I feel like a lot of stories end up being the hero's journey.
They do.
And I also get to write about the underworld, so that's really fun too. And Jeri, your new book, The Library of the Damned, sounds amazing, and I can't wait to see it.
You should check it out.
I'm going to. I'm going to put it on my TBR.
I enjoyed the first one in the series.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I've come to the conclusion that just about every significant event that's happened to great people throughout history and not so great people can be described in some version of the hero's journey. And and maybe that's what historical fiction is about, is putting that story into context for a period of time so the reader can understand what people are experiencing. And so we've got some comments here from a Facebook reader, our listener. Thank you for listening. It says, for all the panelists, what is your favorite part of creating your fictional worlds? Anybody?
I think when you're researching something and you find the perfect thing, it just
The unexpected
pops
thing.
out at you, and you go, oh, that's exactly what I was looking for, because that's going to tie this together with that. And then, it's the serendipitous piece of something that you find. And very often you can find those in the footnotes. Don't dismiss those footnotes. Read them, because sometimes you're going to find little gems in there. So do all your research.
A follow-up question to that, and also the opposite. What was your least favorite part of world building? I think my least favorite part is not being able to use all the fascinating things I've discovered.
No, that's true.
Well, just write more books.
You leave so much on the cutting room floor because
Right, you can't have it all.
Yeah.
you can't. I mean, there's just you could write another book, but that's someone made an observation. I don't know if this is much of a question. When we were talking about the significance of back when we were talking about the significance of historical fiction, perhaps historical or fantasy or sci-fi stories make a more powerful impact due to being so dramatically different from the everyday world we live in, yet similar enough to relate to. It takes us further outside our regular life. I would agree to that 100%. Who wants to read something that just describes our life here?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I feel like especially in sci-fi, that really works because it's a way of seeing the world in a way that's so different that you can kind of see it more clearly in a way.
Absolutely.
So I feel like that's a really good point.
I think that's why you see so much historical fiction, what is called and sold and marketed as historical fiction, have those moments of fantasy in them. I think of the book now they've made into a movie, by Colson Whitehead, the
The Underground Railroad.
The Underground Railroad. Right in the middle, it's got this fantasy element where he takes the main characters out of the real world and puts them forward into another world to kind of explain what's been going on with them and what they're up against. So, but, you know, it's still being sold and marketed as historical fiction, which is really interesting.
That'd be more magical realism in the middle
Yeah,
of it. Maybe?
yeah. I would consider that magical realism, and it would, to me, it would take it out of the realm of historical. But he's using historical setting and then taking it out of the historical to tell a story. But it's not the magical realism that you get, you know, from South America.
Yeah, I feel like literary historical fiction, like Lincoln and the Bardo, has its own kind of realm and rules.
Right.
It's a little bit different from the kind of historical fiction that
we're used
normally,
to.
Yeah, because it's like Lincoln and the Bardo is this total paranormal, I mean, you know, historical fantasy type thing, but it's not labeled that way. It's labeled literary fiction, even though it's super wacky.
It's not considered it's not considered fantasy fiction.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think so.
Okay.
Mostly because of the writer. But answering the question about the favorite part of creating your fictional world, I feel like understanding what they wear. And I mean, for me, the Minoan women did not wear tops. And that was really hard to wrap my mind around.
You mean in everyday life?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, bare-breasted.
And
John
yeah,
is
I mean,
John is
like-
thinking now that he really wants to look into this culture more.
So that was really hard to like, especially.
Well, you see it in their art.
You see it in their art, right?
Yeah.
And then it turned out like that was just their outfit. And the other thing that was hard for me, but also a great challenge, is because I was writing about a time before wine was invented. I realized that my first scene needed to not have wine. So I had to replace their wine with mead because that was something that they had. And so when you're, I mean, it's like, it's so nuts to go back that far and be like, you know, how, like, if there was no wine, what did they drink?
Oh, there's always alcohol.
Right?
Always alcohol.
So it's interesting when it becomes kind of cohesive and you begin to figure out how your world actually works, and, you know, money and transition, transactional things. And so it's really great when you get that.
Did you make recipes? If there are any extant of that type of thing?
I did study different kinds of recipes, and I also made a point of having things that we wouldn't normally think about. So she has like, I think it was basil tea, and then like coriander cuttlefish with honey. So I kind of mixed, it was like a little
Oh, I
bit
have
more,
that all the time.
yeah. I know.
Sounds
So that old
exotic.
recipe, you know, so I had like a whole list of the things that they had available, and then I mixed a few ingredients that we might not normally think of going together.
So the Facebook audience has asked a question of Linda. What happened to the Cornish miners who came to California? Did they stay here or go home?
I don't know that they all stayed here, but a lot of them did, and their descendants are still living in
Grass Valley.
Valley, and
Wow.
still have they still celebrate a Cornish Christmas, and they sing hymns in Cornish language, and you can buy Cornish pasties all over the town, which is fun. And that was,
Is that a dish? Is that
it was the food the miners carried. It's a pastry, and it's shaped, it's like straight across and then round on the bottom, and the bottom is crimped, and they would hold it by the crimped edges. It's like a little pie, and eat from the middle, because that way then they throw away the crimped edges because it was all dirty from their hands,
Yes.
of mine dust from the mines. And I saw at the museum, you can see the kind of lunch pails they carried, where the bottom was filled up with hot tea, and then the pasty went on top of it, and that kept it warm until lunchtime.
Wow.
It was really fascinating.
So there's a lot of English settled in because English settled in Grass Valley area.
Right.
I have no idea. I think I'm a little Cornish.
What are what are some Cornish last names?
Well, Penhallow is one I've used. Oh, anything beginning with Pen.
P-E-N?
P-E-N, Penhallow, Pendragon. Otherwise,
Teague.
yeah, it's been a while since I did the research, so, but
Okay.
I
certain.
did some medieval Cornish stuff, so yeah, Teague and other
Oh,
ones.
The name Jennifer was originally Cornish.
Mhm.
what?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm learning so much.
Well, we know Zenobia is not Cornish.
Zenobia is not Cornish. I mean, I might be a little bit Cornish.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit too.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. What other questions do I have? And do any of you ladies have any other comments or questions or?
Oh, I have a realization that today is admissions day, the day that California was admitted into the Union. So I
Wow,
thought that was really appropriate to mention while we were talking about history of our state.
that's a significant event for Californians.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This whole time I thought admissions day had something to do with school until this year when my kids just had a 5-day weekend and they had admissions day observed. But I realized admissions day is actually the 9th of September. So
You knew something was up when admissions day they're home, right?
What are you doing here?
oh my
You
God.
should be admitted to school.
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
You do any of you, when you write, and how do you modernize aspect of your stories without losing the historical nature of it? I mean, we have to modernize a little bit, maybe the language,
Mhm.
it might be impossible to get every single little detail right. It was easier for me because, I grew up in the 60s
Mhm.
here in California.
Mhm.
Any comments?
Well, in the medieval time period, the 14th century that I write about, I certainly don't write it in Middle English. That would cut off a lot of my readers right there.
Mhm.
But you used a more formalized pattern of speech for the noblemen and a less formalized pattern of speech for the lower servants. And I don't transliterate accents, but I give you the feel of how they're speaking and what the content of what they're saying. So it comes out that way. So there's things you can do, and in the Victorian one, it's just so fun to have everybody speaking so formally to each other, and all the euphemisms that they use for swearing, dash it, or
Dash it.
watching blazes, by Jove, so it's a lot of fun.
I do the same thing with the Regency, but I don't use the long sentences that they used. If you look at, I think I once counted the number of words in the first sentence of Jane Austen's Persuasion, and it was like 104 words. I mean,
God, no.
we can't do that. Not for modern readers.
They had a lot of liberty with, I don't say liberty, they had a very formal style back then, and they could do and say things that was we can't do today.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing another Victorian novel because I can't throw away all this good research I did. So it's going to be a Sherlock Holmes pastiche mystery series.
Ooh.
And so, and one of the things that when you're reading books of the time period, like Sherlock Holmes and some other things, the upper classes treated servants like children, like they were stupid. And so the people in my books they're going to be from the servant class and have to put up with that kind of stuff, and then you can know exactly what they were thinking the whole time they're being talked down to. So I mean, it's stuff like that that's very interesting that you can.
So probably Downton Abbey is not historically accurate.
It isn't really, no. That's why I gave up watching it pretty early on. So
Okay.
I think
I
that's
know
one
a
of-
lot of people are going to hate me for that.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the ways sometimes we modernize things by not showing how awful they were to them.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you know, or some of them, or maybe your bad guys are really condescending, but the main characters have to be a little
More sympathetic in a way that they probably
We're going
would
the other way, like in Deadwood, where it's just over the top
yeah,
and the language is
Yeah.
completely wrong.
yeah. I've heard that.
Yeah.
I watched a couple episodes. I go, this
Mhm.
is pretty hardcore.
Not that some things weren't, but sometimes a lot of that went way over the top. Yeah, and that's what brings in audiences. But you can't get away with that kind of stuff in books. You can get away with it a lot in TV and in movies, but not in
I'm
books.
not even sure they got away with it in that show. It's not on the TV.
Pretty sure they
anymore.
did, though.
Yeah, it was.
Or they did it,
It was.
They-
but I'm not sure it was that popular.
It
Yeah.
was very popular.
It was.
It was
Oh,
for
yeah.
a while. Yeah, it was for a
Very,
while.
very much so.
All right, I
Okay.
do have to burst in because we're at time. Just to really quickly thank you all so much for coming, and we started a couple minutes late, so there was one more audience question. Maybe we can get to it after the official dismissal. So
I don't
anyways,
see it. Okay.
you
You haven't
it's-
put it in yet. Okay.
I haven't put it in yet. I just wanted to thank you all so much for your time and coming and sharing your expertise and your humor and your wonderful stories to the Santa Clarita area. I am pretty sure I'll be able to pull the part that didn't originally get recorded from Facebook, so we should be able to cobble everything together for anyone who missed the first half minute or so. And anyways, with that, for everybody who's here, I did want to encourage you to come to the next history talk, which will be a month from now, and it will be on Facebook Live again. So we're really excited to keep this program going, and any other things that you are interested in as far as library programming, we have available on the website, santaclaritalibrary.com/events. And there is also in the chat on Facebook a link to a blog post that gives all of the information to get to these wonderful authors and buy their books. So we hope you do that. All right. And with that, the question from Facebook really quickly was just asking, it may not have heard some of the earlier talk about fantasy elements, but just asking if all of the authors put fantasy elements in their work or in different works. So can tackle that really quickly.
The book I wrote, based in Delano, fantasy wouldn't have worked. But yes, I love fantasy and have used it in several other books.
In my medieval mysteries, they all deal with a religious relic or venerated object. And so there is a little bit of fantasy element, you know, do they or don't they have the powers that they are ascribed to?
There you go.
I think all my books, if not fantasy, my second book is definitely historical fantasy, The Genie's Last Wish, about a eunuch in the Imperial Ottoman harem who's
Love
given
that one.
genie in the bottle. I know, Jeri, your Library of the Damned, I'm like Jewish mysticism and magic, but all of my books have an element of magic. If not like full on fantasy, there's always something magical happening. Because for me, like that's what one of the things that is so fun about writing.
And my Linda books pretty much are not, except there's a little paranormal element to Rogue's Hostage. But then I've also written as Lindy Lamont, and I have a couple of medieval fantasies there under that name.
Okay. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, John.
And
Yeah.
thank you, Santa Clarita Library.
Thanks,
Thank
Morgan.
you, thank you, Morgan, for having us.
everyone.
Yes,
Of
thanks.
course. Happy to have you, and to reference Jeri from earlier. I loved listening to this and I learned a lot. All right, I'll go ahead
Fantastic.
and turn that live stream off. Bye, everyone.
All right, thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.